In the epistle this morning, St. Paul speaks about the vices and the concupiscences, and it calls to mind, when we think about the concupiscences, it calls to mind the desires or the appetites of the human soul. So when we look at the classic study of psychology, which is the study of the soul, the psyche is the soul. Classic study of psychology then, in the Christian sense, is going to be studying the faculties of the human soul, the intellect, the memory and the will, the passions, the appetites, and then also the effects of grace, the gifts of the Holy Ghost, the fruits of the Spirit, the infused supernatural virtues, all of that. And those make up the human soul in the classic sense of psychology, the study of the soul. Now, if we look at the appetites are the concupiscences, the desires that St. Paul speaks about. And these can lead to sinful behavior, but also we recognize that there are good things in the human soul and that the flesh fights against the spirit and likewise. So how do we manage all that? Well, God has certainly given us a way, but it's good for us to understand the makeup of the human soul. So we have what are called the appetites, and I've spoken about these before, so maybe these will be familiar to you, but then we're going to go beyond that to speak about the passions. So the appetites, we could say that we have two types of appetites. We have what's called the concupiscible appetite, and we have the irascible appetite. Now the concupiscible appetite is inclined toward that which suits the senses, and it flees from what is harmful. So it seeks what is good and flees from what it deems harmful. So let's think about the senses then. We see something and it looks good and we're attracted to it. So our eyes, our sense of sight tells us what is good and what is not good, what repels us. And likewise, we smell something that smells wonderful and we're attracted to it. And if something smells horrible, we flee from that. And likewise, we hear something that sounds lovely and we want to hear more. And if we hear something that sounds terrible, we flee from that. And likewise, we taste something that's delicious and we want more. And we taste something that tastes horrible and we spit it out. And likewise, we touch something that feels good and we want to touch that again. And likewise, something that's prickly, well, you might mistakenly avoid pruning back your roses because they prick you with the thorns, but you still have to cut your roses. Not yet, but in a few months, you'll cut them back partially, and then in the winter, you'll cut them way down. And you might cut yourself along the way, but you still have to do it. And that brings us around to the irascible appetite. The irascible appetite does not engage the good simply, but is inclined toward the arduous good. It's inclined to overcome contraries and to rise above obstacles. Oh, those rose bushes are out of control. I'm going to cut myself, but I'm going to cut them down because in the spring next year they're going to look great. Or you could say that, for instance, all right, so the French say that this cheese is really delicious, but boy, it smells terrible. So my concupiscible appetite tells me to flee from this cheese. But my intellect tells me that, well, these people say that this cheese is very good, and it's the most expensive cheese I could possibly buy. And if I really want to cultivate a refined taste, I need to rise above the concupiscible appetite and engage my irascible appetite for the arduous good and eat that cheese. And maybe I will enjoy it, and maybe I won't. But hopefully that cheese is good for me. And so I have benefited through the use of my irascible appetite. It may be also that one sees that, for instance, let's say another typical example is that you wish to accomplish something that's very difficult. Maybe you want to climb a mountain or run the hood to coast. I mean, after all, you're not getting any younger. This might be your last opportunity to train to run the hood to coast. Boy, that's going to be hard. That's going to be a difficult task. But my irascible appetite wants to conquer it. And so you train and you run the hood to coast. All right, so I think you have the idea of these two appetites of the human soul. Now let's apply those then to the passions. Now a passion could be called the same thing as an emotion or a feeling. And Adolf Tanqueray tells us that the passions, in the philosophical sense of the term, are not necessarily nor wholly evil, but the passions are often considered to be bad. Now they're not actually bad, but the passions have to be understood and controlled. So there are 11 passions, and the passions are as follows. Let's see here. There are 11 passions as follows. So there's love, and there's hate. There's desire, and there's flight, and there's delight. And there's sorrow, and there's hope, and there's despair. And there's audacity, and there's fear, and there's anger. And these are the 11 passions. Now let's associate then these with the appetites. So we have what are called the pleasure passions, and there are 6 of these. The pleasure passions are associated with the concupiscible appetite. So recall that the concupiscible appetite desires the simple good. Smells good, tastes good, looks good, feels good, sounds good, and so you want it. All right. So the first of the concupiscible pleasure passions is love. Love is a yearning for union with a person or thing that pleases us. We thereby crave possession of it. Now this could be another person, or it could be a ripe peach on a tree. It smells good, it tastes good. You wish to have union with that peach, so you eat it. And then the peach is gone. And the peach season is over. And you've got to wait a whole other 9 months or so until peaches come back into season again. And that will lead us to another passion that we'll come back to. But the next pleasure passion would be hatred. Hatred is an eagerness to rid ourselves of what displeases us. It is born of love in the sense that we hate that which militates against what we love. So if you love another person and something gets in the way of you and that other person, you're going to hate that thing. Or if you love to ski and in the springtime it starts to warm up and all the snow melts and you can't ski anymore, then you're going to hate summer. Or if you love to swim, then you're going to hate winter because it militates against what you love. Unless, of course, you have an indoor swimming pool. So I'm just speaking about this in a simple way. The third passion, the pleasure passion, would be desire. Now, desire is a quest for an absent good, something that you perceive to be good, but it's absent from you. And so you desire something that you don't have. Something that you consider to be good, something that you love. Maybe somebody you love has traveled across the country and you miss them and you desire their company. The fourth is aversion or flight. Now, aversion or flight makes us shun or repel approaching evil. You sense something to be evil and you have an aversion to it. You smell something that smells terrible and you have an aversion to it. You know, maybe as a child you have a particular vegetable that you don't like, or you don't like the texture of it, or you don't like the smell of it, and so you have an aversion from it. But that doesn't mean it's necessarily evil. But there are evil things that we have an aversion to, even if we just perceive them to be evil. Now the fifth is joy. Joy is the satisfaction arising from a present good. So joy is a passion. And you might say that now that it has cooled down some, it's not quite so hot, and yet the sun is still shining. And you could wear a sweater, but you don't have to. You can just enjoy being outside and the pleasant temperature and the sunshine. It gives you joy. And it's a simple thing, but it arises from a present good. You're in good health, and it's a sunny day, and you've got all the time in the world to just enjoy the day, and you have joy. Now the sixth pleasure passion is sadness. Sadness, on the other hand, makes us grieve over and shrink from a present evil. So let's say that somebody you love is sick, and so you grieve from that present evil of your loved one being sick and suffering. You have sadness. All right, so those are the six pleasure passions. Now what we have are in the irascible appetite are those things that are difficult and arduous. And these are called the aggressive passions. So first we have courage, or daring. And courage makes us strive after union with the object loved, the acquisition of which is difficult. You have something that's difficult. You wish to, let's say that peach that you love, you've already picked all the rest of the peaches lower down in the tree, and the only peach left, and it's just perfect. It's a very large peach. It's perfectly ripe, and it's the last one left, but it's way up there. And how are you going to get that? Well, it's going to be an arduous task getting that last peach, but it's the last peach of the season, and you're going to have to wait many, many more months before you can get another peach. How are you going to get that peach? Well, ingenuity and courage and daring, you're going to get that peach. That's the arduous appetite. All right, secondly, or the eighth passion here, is fear. Now, fear prompts us to shrink from an evil that is difficult to avoid. An evil that's difficult to avoid. Let's say there's an evil out there and you've been able to avoid it, and now you can't avoid it anymore. Maybe there is something threatening your future employment, some sort of mandate. You don't have any choice over. Well, you do have the choice. You could lose your job, or you give in to the mandate, whatever it might be. So maybe previously you merely had an aversion, but now you have fear, and fear is a passion. But then we have hope. Hope eagerly bears us toward the thing loved, the acquisition of which is possible, though it's difficult. Why, I hope I can get that last peach from the top of the tree. It might fall in the meantime and be bruised and ruined. Maybe a bird will come and peck at it. Maybe by the time it falls, it'll fall into something yucky, and I will have lost that peach. But I hope that I can get that peach. It's going to be difficult, but I have hope. I hope that I can get to heaven. It's going to be arduous, but I have hope. And then there's despair. Now, despair arises in the soul when the acquisition of the object loved seems impossible. I'm never going to get that peach. I've done everything I can to get that peach, and I'm just never going to get it. I may as well just give up. Well, that would be to lose hope. Now we have to look at despair as also being a temptation. It's a passion. It's also a temptation. Hope is an infused supernatural virtue that God gives us when we're in a state of grace. And if we are waning in hope, if we're starting to let despair come in and distract us, it's a good time to go to confession. Don't entertain the temptation to despair. It's a temptation. It's a lie. There is always hope. Even if there's just a little bit, there's always hope. Yes, it is an arduous task to get to heaven, but I have hope. I'm not going to despair. I'll at least make it into purgatory. If I even try a little bit, I can at least make it into purgatory. But my irascible appetite makes me wish to strive for the arduous, which is getting to heaven. Now, once you get to purgatory, you'll get there. It might take a while. It might take a very, very long time, or it might just be a short time. But even so, we cannot lose hope. Hope is a supernatural infused virtue. God helps us. He gives us hope. So if you're waning in hope, go to confession. Pray your rosary. Go take a walk in the sunshine. Go pick some cucumbers and make pickles. There's lots of them out there. And by the way, if anyone's looking for cucumbers, I'm harvesting about enough for 2 jars of pickles each day. And if anyone has a good recipe for pickles, I'd be happy to receive that. And you see, there's simple joys to be had, even when things look terrible, even when you're struggling with hope. There's always some joy to be had. Make some pickles. Go pick some tomatoes. Go see what your neighbors are growing and see if you can trade plums for corn on the cob or whatever. Take out your rosary and pray. Listen to God speaking to your soul. Come to adoration on Wednesday nights. Allow God to fill you with hope. And if there's nothing else you can do, if you can't even utter the words, just pick up the rosary and finger the beads. If that's all you can do, just finger the beads first, just one at a time. Even if you can't bring yourself to utter the words, Our Father and Hail Mary, just finger the beads. Before you know it, you're going to start praying. And before you know it, you're going to calm down. And everything's going to seem bearable. You can make it through. God will help you to make it through. Now, the last passion is anger. Anger violently repels what hurts us and incites the desire of revenge. Now, anger, we could say, is a proper response when our intellect discerns an injustice or hurt. We have a proper response of anger. But anger can also become unleashed and turn into a passion. And that is where we have to engage not only the intellect and the affections, but the will. The will, we have free will. We can allow our passions to spin out of control. But we have free will, and we have to be able to control our emotions. We can't be led altogether by our emotions. Our Lord, when He speaks of serving God and mammon, we have to be single-hearted to serve God. And God has given us our intellect and our emotions and our will. So we cannot live merely by the emotions. That'll get us into a lot of trouble. But we also cannot live merely by the intellect. The intellect and the emotions need to help balance each other out, but our will is what governs what we do. We decide what we're going to do by an act of the will, regardless of our emotions. Sometimes we have to act according to the will, to do what's right. Sometimes our intellect, we just discern that things are too out of control and we don't know what to do about it. And our feelings start to spin out of control. We get angry, we get passionate. Pick up your rosary. Go pick some cucumbers, make some pickles. Sometimes you just have to distract yourself. But distract yourself with something good and not with something harmful. Don't distract yourself with alcohol. Don't distract yourself with drugs. Those are not an escape. Don't distract yourself with despair. Distract yourself with prayer. Distract yourself with good things. Go exercise. Get some fresh air. All sorts of good things you can do. God will not abandon us. He's given us everything we need. And He's given us all these faculties of the soul. It's good to understand them so that you learn to govern them. Live according to God's commandments, which are absolute. We have to live according to God's commandments. Don't be confused about that. And let us keep praying and keep persevering in the way forward, which is arduous and delightful. Nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen.